Hello, hello. Welcome to CashFlow Hacks. I'm your host, Chris, and with me today is my co-host, Stephanie.
Hey. I'm so excited to be here with our loyal listeners, the CashFlow hackers, and everyone else who's ready to make more, save more, and start living more now.
If you are interested in hacks to increase your cash flow, then you are in the right place. Every couple of weeks, Stephanie and I are going to be discussing different tips and strategies, or just keeping you in the loop with some different topics that your financial advisor doesn't want you to know. And why are we doing this? Because the less you know, the more they make. And we want to help you flip that script. So our last podcast, Stephanie and I talked about the essentials of estate planning. And we alluded that this episode, we would talk a little more about trust and how they can uniquely protect you.
Right. There's so much information to share on trust. So in my opinion, they definitely needed their own segment.
Yes, but before we get going, let's give you a quick recap on our last episode. The reason for a trust is that it serves as a great way, a smooth way to be able to transfer your assets after you die. And they're not just for the wealthy. They can protect, control your assets, reduce estate taxes, avoid probate, maintain privacy, and much more.
Yeah. Trust can be thought of like safe boxes where we take our assets and put them inside the box. I mean, technically, yes, they're written legal agreements and they involve three players, but we like to think of them like a box. The three players, though, you have the creator of the trust, the trustor, the person or company that oversees the trust, the trustee, and those who benefit from the trust, the beneficiaries. I like to call them bennies for short. Now, depending on the type of trust you draft, you can serve in one, two, or all three of these trust roles.
So I like calling them a box, and Stephanie has added the safe box, which I like. She's going to tell you a little bit later why we're calling it the safe box. But listen, you don't want to just create this safe box if you want to have this protection and tax benefits for the beneficiaries. First of all, you have to fund it. You have to decide what goes into the box and what happens with the assets in the trust and when and how your beneficiaries are going to receive the assets. So when you hear somebody say, or you hear us say, you need to fund your trust, what we mean is put your stuff in the box. If you don't put it in the box, it's not protected. And what kind of stuff are we talking about? Your personal belongings, cash, stocks, bonds, life insurance, policies, your homes, and any other real estate you might have, including businesses, are just some of the examples that you can use to fund your trust. After that, I know it can be pretty complex. I know a lot of people speak jargon when it comes to this, and that's why a lot of people are confused about it. So Stephanie loves to speak jargon, and I know a lot of you out there like to listen to the jargon. So I'm going to have Stephanie tell you the difference between a couple of the trusts.
Yeah. So in answer, though, to your question of why I like to call them safe boxes is because all of the assets that you put into the box are safe from other people. So if you think of like your safe, you have a key or you have numbers or you have some sort of way of preventing just anybody from getting inside. Well, trusts do that same thing. Like they prevent other people that you don't want to have access to what's inside. So it's not just an open box. That's all I mean by the safe box. But good point, Chris. Yes. Back to the jargon, though. So what Chris was saying is that trust, I mean, they're so intricate, right? So there's different types of trust. There's different ways that you can set them up. And there's something called a simple trust and a complex trust. Now, the difference between those two is a simple trust distributes all the income that's produced by whatever assets are inside of that trust. So let's say that you have, I don't know, stocks, and then there was income produced by the selling of it. Well, it's going to be distributed out to the beneficiaries. A clause there is that it can't be to charitable organizations, but the principle of what was in the trust stays in the trust, and that makes it a simple one. Now, if the trust accumulates any income or makes distributions to a charity or distributes any of the original assets that principle, then it's considered a complex trust. And really why you would want to know the difference is because complex trusts are subject to higher tax rates and some other things. So you want to know not to make distributions to a charity if you wanted to have a simple trust, for example. Taxes are just so important when we do financial planning. And in general, like when we do estate planning, we want to take into consideration how taxes will affect what we're doing. Now, we've already talked so much about taxes in other episodes, and I'm sure we'll bring them up again later in future episodes. But in this one, let's talk about why one might establish a trust.
So, like you said, wealthy use estate planning tools all the time,
Mm-hmm.
But there's a plethora of other reasons why one might consider creating one, even if they're growing their assets.
Right.
And I say, like, what am I talking about? If you have any asset, you have an estate plan, or you have an estate. Some people say, I don't have an estate. You do. If you have any assets, that is your estate. And I have several examples of people that have a will and they didn't have a trust and how it turned out for them. And I'm going to give you an example of one of my clients. She came to me after her mother passed away, and they don't have a lot. And I'm telling you this example because not having a trust, because they thought they shouldn't have one because they didn't have a lot, didn't turn out so well for them.
Kicked them in the butt, huh?
Yeah, it's been 5 years and they're still in probate. And, the story basically is her mom did have home. That was her part of her estate. She had a bank account. It didn't have a whole lot of money in it. She even had a couple vehicles, but she didn't put beneficiaries on anything. And her bank account, she didn't have those transfer on death. She didn't have anything really taken care of. She had a will that she had written, but it was an old will and hadn't been updated. And 5 years later, the family's still in probate. And that's they had a home, and that home that they were living in, there was some kids. They weren't teenagers. They were just young, like in their 20s. They didn't have good credit. They had horrible credit. And when they found out that the woman that owned the home had passed away, the bank called it and said it needs to be paid off now.
Wow.
Well, nobody had good enough credit to be able to go and get a loan. And so they actually lost the home.
That's awful.
And it's like, people don't realize it, that people that have a lot of money, it's like, it's good that they have a trust. It's good, that they're protecting themselves. But people that don't have a lot of money, really, they need to have something protecting them, or else they will lose, they'll lose everything for their family and cost their family a lot of headache.
Yeah.
And money. But I just wanted to throw that you don't have to have a lot to be able to, if you have anything, you have an estate. Might be a small estate, but you do have an estate.
Yeah, that's true. And, you don't want someone just because they have bad credit not to be able to take over the payments for the home, or in that case.
They did that for a couple of years. They made the payments, and they were doing good that way, but they just couldn't buy the home.
Yeah.
And they don't have any there's no empathy when it comes to this kind of stuff. The bank says, we're calling it. We want all the money right now. And they don't care.
They don't. It's true. They just call the loan and want their money. So that's, a great reason to have a trust, because the trust would have been able to get the loan, right?
They wouldn't have lost the home.
But speaking of, you mentioned that they weren't teenagers, they were young adults, but it made me think of if you do have minor children. Your situation was that she had a small estate, but, maybe you have a bigger estate, but you have minor children, and right at the precipice there at that young adult stage where they're not quite mature, and you don't want to leave them a large sum of money outright.
Right. Few adults, much less young adults, understand how to manage money and have discipline when it comes to making financial decisions, especially when it comes to their future. Most people, they're living for today, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but
no judgment here.
Think about when you were graduating high school stuff. What would you have done if you received a large inheritance at that age?
Woo! I would have spent it on travel. I would have traveled the world. I would have bought clothes. I would have totally wasted it. Well, no, travel's never wasting it. I love to travel, but I was absolutely all about the here and now.
I love it. That's why I had to ask you that question. That's exactly why I think it's great to have a trust, because you can hold the assets in the trust and you can direct the trustee to provide that financial support to your children. and use it for whatever that you deem appropriate, like medical bills, higher education, wedding expenses, maybe their first home. And then you also can mandate or, put it in the trust when and how that your child will receive the disbursements from the trust. I love this, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good too, because, kids make stupid financial choices. It makes me think of a friend of mine in high school. We had just turned 18 and we were on vacation in Santorini, and she called her dad asking for more money so we could upgrade to a suite as for overlooking, the caldera. But so, of course, he said no. And she said she was going to pull it from her trust fund that her grandparents left her. And he laughed. Because she couldn't get access until I think it was 25. But I don't remember. But I'm sure, though, if it was 25, that once she did turn 25 years old, she appreciated the fact that she had not wasted her money on stupid, the word I'm about to say.
Maybe. Well, at least her dad was liked the fact that she couldn't get a hold of it. And that, again, is a good reason to have a trust. Another good reason is to protect the inheritance from, families blended families. I know, of course, you'd want to support your spouse financially when you pass away, but it's important to think about how to protect your kids also from previous marriage or, your direct line family members. Without a trust, the beneficiaries who ultimately receive your assets might be one of your surviving ex-spouses. Several ex-spouses these days. And you don't want your kids to end up like Cinderella, right? Cinderella is a good example of all her stepsisters got everything.
Right.
I've seen this happen where a man has a lot of assets, and when he passed away, his wife got remarried and she had kids with her new husband, and the adult children didn't receive anything. And the only reason, because it wasn't specified. It wasn't put in a trust. Nobody knew. And guess what? The feuds began.
All the bickering, I can imagine. The arguments, the turmoil. I actually had a conversation with a client of mine, Joe, about something similar. So she is married, but she has children from her previous marriage, and her current husband has children from his previous marriage. So total blended family. And she wanted to set up a trust in specific for her home. That was her concern. She, had other assets that they put in, but it was really about the house because she wanted her children to receive their inheritance. And like we were talking about before, it's not just for the wealthy. The predominant bulk of her estate was her house. So that's why it was so important to her. Anyway, so she wanted to make sure that the 50% of the house that was hers went to her children after she died. But she also didn't want to throw her husband out on his butt, right? So if she were to pass away, she didn't want it that he didn't have enough funds to pay off her kids their portion. And, she didn't want to put him in the situation where he would have to sell the house so he could give them the 50%. So she put in the stipulation that he could live in the home for his full life, for the duration of his life. And then once he passed, the home would be sold and her kids would get the 50%, and then he could do whatever he wanted with the 50%. But her kids would not lose their inheritance. They would get it, but just at the time of death of her husband. And without a trust, she would not have been able to set something like that up.
Right. So that's like if your spouse gets remarried and then
that's another thing. Yeah.
if you die, your spouse gets remarried, and then your spouse dies before their new spouse.
Yeah. Neither your kids or his kids get it.
Kids. Oh my goodness.
The new wife gets
this. Has happened this happens all the time. And it's hard to see.
Oh my gosh. Could you imagine? I'd be so livid.
Oh.
If I die, my kids don't get it. It goes to my husband. He gets remarried, and then the new spouse gets it and my kids don't get anything.
Right. Or the new spouse's kids.
It would go to his new wife, all of his assets, and not my kids.
Right. So it's another good reason.
Yeah.
If you got to set it up properly. And as long as you do that, you're going to make sure that everybody's taken care of. And it's all going to it's all going to happen smooth. It's going to be smooth. How often do you see these things happen smoothly?
Rarely. That's why trusts are so
Almost
good.
never. Yeah. You know what else we got to think about?
What?
Unmarried couples.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Unmarried couples don't have the same rights as married ones. And you might accidentally disinherit your partner if you don't have something like this written down. You don't have it taken care of. If it's not set up properly, you could
Accidentally, not wanting to, but just accidentally do it. Oh my gosh, yes.
So this will just ensure that your partner can serve, as your successor trustee and manage your estate if you die, which I think I just mentioned this to you earlier. You were talking about one of your clients that something happened like this with them.
Yeah. It was an accidental disinheritance and they didn't have a trust, but it's something people don't think about. They don't realize that because it's accidental in that situation with the unmarried couples. And even, in some instances where you just think that somebody's going to get something because, you did one thing, like you just did a will, and then you realize that was not enough.
Oh, you know what? That just reminds me. I was just talking to a client the other day about this estate planning, and they told me that in their community, like nobody has a trust.
Really?
And most of them don't even have wills because they just assumed. They said they just assumed that it automatically goes to next of kin. Automatically.
Wow.
It's amazing
what
how
is
many
that
people
expression?
Don't have. It's not
what you don't know can hurt you.
Yes.
You make an assumption. You make an
ignorance is not bliss.
There you go.
In this situation. So and honestly, I think that's sort of how they thought about it. Ignorance is bliss as long as we don't know. And
misinformation is really bad. They thought one way and it was the wrong information and they acted based on misinformation,
which is, like
financial ruin.
So much bad information out there.
That's true.
These days.
Very good point. Another good reason you should have a trust is if you own properties in different states. I'm going to use you as an example. Okay, Chris? So you own properties in multiple states, right? And if you didn't have a trust, then your executor.
My executor, you mean?
Sorry, we had to throw in a joke. I said that mistakenly and we laughed and laughed and laughed. So I had to throw the joke at Chris again. Anyway, they would have to deal with the probate proceedings in each location after your death. So could you imagine they have to go through probate in every state that you own property? Oh, what a headache. But it's easily avoidable if a trust owns all the properties.
Right. It's a good thing I have you, Steph.
Yeah.
Stephanie is my paper chaser. She's always on top of this stuff. So, the thing is, you have to make sure you put the assets in the trust. I know so many people that have set up a trust and they didn't understand that they had to put the stuff in the trust. That's why I started calling it a box. I'm like, you just have an empty box. If you don't put the stuff in the box, you have an empty box and nothing's being protected. So whether you're talking to your estate planning attorney or if you work with us, make sure you put the stuff in the box. This is what we do. We help our clients make sure that they're, the deed for out-of-state property is prepared correctly, recorded, and actually transferred into the trust. This helps prevent issues when it's time for the distribution of trust assets. So listen, if you have a trust and you think your stuff is in the trust, your home, make sure you go and look up the title. Go on the courthouse records, look it up, see what the name of your house, who owns your home. Is it you? Do you still own your home or does your trust own the home? Because I don't know how many people I've talked to that told me they had a trust.
And nothing's in the trust.
Nothing's in the trust. It's, I can't even believe, to me, that should be like illegal and wrong of an attorney to set up a trust and not help their clients put the stuff in the trust. It's terrible. The things you see happening out there today.
Well, as you have recently just moved, we can kind of hear the frustration in her voice, right? She knows all of the documents she had and paperwork that she's had to do to keep things updated. And, we discuss things like this, things that we go through, things that our clients go through, so that our listeners can benefit. And just know, we know how frustrating it can be, and we know what common pitfalls are out there, like thinking that you're set up because, you got the trust, you paid for the trust, and you thought everything is fantastic. But that last step of putting stuff into the trust wasn't done. So like Chris said, look it up. It's so essential to do it. Make sure, do the double check.
And now, you're talking about all this paperwork. It also makes me think of all the business documents that I'm working on right now. If you're a business owner, trusts are beneficial for business owners also. And the type of business structure that you have, it can actually affect how your business transfers to your beneficiaries. Talk with us about business succession planning and the pros and cons of setting up a trust and titling your business assets in the trust name. Trust can be beneficial for those who, want to have a legacy, want to keep a legacy or have a legacy. The way it's set up, your beneficiaries or whoever you want to take over and manage your business and your finances, the trust can help with that. Make sure it's smooth. I'm all about smooth. We got to have smooth transition.
Yeah, to key employees. Just kidding, Chris. Not really. But that does segue into another reason to get a trust, if you know our background, when you're concerned about declining health. So, Chris, for you, the segue that I was talking about, right? You do have declining health in the back of your mind, right? Succession planning is something that are cognizant of, right? So what will happen in the future? What is going to happen to your business? What will happen to CQ Consulting? Well, a trust may be a smart decision. So for all of our listeners out there that may worry about how a decrease in physical or mental health may affect your ability to manage your business or even your assets in general, right? You can consider a trust. I mean, yes, there's another option, which is a court-appointed conservator, but who really wants that? If you can no longer act on your own behalf, a replacement trustee can take over the management of your trust assets. So establishing a trust before an illness or disability really allows you to maintain control because while you're alert and able, you can write out what you want so that those steps are still taken even when you can no longer actively care for the property or assets in your estate.
You're talking about that and you are calling it an option. I don't know about calling that an option. That is, to me, when I think of options, it's like my choices, what I get to decide. Oh, look, listen, Siri's talking to me. She's talking.
Hi, Siri.
Goodbye. No, it made me think of options. It's like having a choice. And when you don't do a trust or have a trust, you don't have a choice when it comes to conservatorship. Do you think that Lindsay Lohan? Britney Spears. Oh boy, I don't know where I came up with that. Britney Spears, she got a conservator. Do you think she had a choice in that matter?
No.
If she had a choice, that would never have happened, right?
No, she bought it.
You're talking about conservatorship. It's not an option. Do not let it be an option. If you want to see or even understand, I didn't even know what it meant. I talked about conservatorship, but I don't think I really, really knew what it meant until I watched an episode of Dirty Money on Netflix. If you really, I think everybody should watch this so they can see what could possibly happen. It made me cry. I was so sad seeing what can happen to people that worked so hard in their life, but they didn't set up a trust. Look at Prince, same thing. He didn't set up anything. And it wasn't terrible for him, conservatorship, no, but it's so sad what can happen to people when they don't know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. So that's why we want you to know what you don't know. And it's about a trust. Look who's calling me. That is so funny. The trust company. The trust company is calling me. He must know I'm talking about this right now. I'm going to put it in the comments, or we're going to put it on the podcast. I think everybody should watch it. Go type it in online, Dirty Money, season 2, episode 5. Everybody needs to know what could possibly happen if they do not have this in place. And the final reason that people should have a trust, the final reason we're going to discuss today is if you have challenging family dynamics. Who doesn't, right? But when you have these dynamics, you definitely want to have a trust, as we talked about before, for privacy. Because when you don't have it, everything is public. Everything is public. And we talked about this before. but it might be something more sensitive, like reasons that inheritance are being paid out, or even, if somebody's been disinherited. If you have a will and you didn't want one of your children to be a part of it, you've disinherited them. There is no way to make sure that happens, because a will can be contested and they can win. If you have a safeguard trust, it cannot be overturned.
Right. Those are all great reasons in life situations to have a trust. Like, I think we went over a couple of really good reasons to have a trust. And I hope our listeners can now understand how trusts are not just for the wealthy, right? We gave situations that can happen to any one of us. I mean, we can all be in a blended family, right? We can all be in a situation, maybe we have an unmarried partnership that, we're not there. We can all just have different things happen to us. So I hope that after, hearing about these different situations, we can all say that we're in agreement that trusts are beneficial, right, Chris?
Trusts are beneficial. Trusts are, to me, they are not just beneficial. They are absolutely mandatory. Yes. If you want options, if you want to have options, if you've worked hard your whole life and you want to have an option, you want to make a choice, you need to do this.
Yeah. So I think that we gave a lot of good value. And I think that maybe our next podcast should be about what kind of trust to pick. What do you think, Chris?
I suppose so. We were going to talk about that today, but I think that we've already been talking long enough today. So let's just make it our next podcast.
All right. So that wraps up for this week. Thank you for tuning in. Join our Facebook group, CashFlow Hacks, and follow our Facebook page, CQ Consulting Services, Inc., our YouTube channel. What is the YouTube channel, Chris?
Financially Sassy Woman.
Yes, our Instagram page, our LinkedIn, and Twitter. We're on all social media. Subscribe, give us a like, a thumbs up. Remember, sharing is caring. Share with anybody that you think needs this information.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back on our next episode, and we will be talking more about estate planning.
Right.
And why.
What to pick. Which
one you need.
Yeah.
Actually, we're not going to tell you which one to pick, but we're going to tell you about different ones so that you can make that decision and you can come talk to us.
All right. So see you on our next episode. Continue helping you flip that script.